Welcome to Biohackers The Invisible Threat. My name is Len Noe. I'm part of the Global Solutions Enablement team and one of CyberArk's white hat hackers. I'm a global security speaker and have been with CyberArk for just about 7 years. I've been in IT professionally for over 20 years in roles ranging from programmer to systems architect. I've been breaking into computers since the Commodore 64 days and spent a large amount of my time in my youth as a black or a gray hat hacker. I'm professionally trained as well as come by a lot of my knowledge by practical application. I'm very active on social media and I invite everyone to reach out over LinkedIn and check out my GitHub and my YouTube channels for more security related content. I'd like to start this presentation today by asking a really easy question. What does a cyborg look like? When you hear the word cyborg, what comes to mind? Maybe a Terminator or Star Wars or Star Trek? Everyone who knows the definition will probably have a vision in their head. And I'd be willing to bet that it's all shiny and to some extent robot looking. Well, I hate to pop the bubble on that, but it's just not the case. Cyborgs are not only on the movie screens anymore, they walk among us and you may be friends with one and just don't know it. These are my hands. I'm a biohacker in the truest sense of the word. I am not only an augmented human with microchips in my hands, but I'm also a white hat hacker. I am a hacker that has modified my body to take advantage of available technology to turn myself into the attack vector. I'm going to explain what my current chips are, as well as giving you a roadmap on what I'm looking to do to continue my journey in becoming more than human. The X-rays, like I said above, these are my hands, and I have the following capabilities with my current implants. I have what is called a FlexNext. This is a very long-range NFC RFID chip. I have a Next implant. It's the same exact chip, just with a much smaller range. I have the Flex M1 Magic. This chip allows me to emulate any number of older access cards, from public transit to membership tokens to physical access. I have a VivoKey Spark 2. This is actually a cryptobionic chip that can perform strong cryptographic functions. Since the time this X-ray was taken, I actually have 2 additional implants. I have what is called a Flex EM. This allows me to emulate most of the popular physical access cards, including the Prox card 2 and 3, as well as HID, Indala, Pyramid, and just a ton more. And finally, I have a Titan biomagnet. This is a magnet that's been implanted that actually allows me to be able to feel electromagnetic currents. I'm also implanting a newer version of the VivoKey with the ability to incorporate Java cards and Java processes. And finally, I'm also in negotiations to safely encapsulate a peg leg, which we will be discussing a little bit later in this talk. So augmented humans are not science fiction. We're here. We're not going anywhere. And as the technology continues to evolve, so will we. I've broken this talk into 3 parts: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the history of who we were, just enough to show that the biohacker transhuman is just the point where science, technology, and humanity meet. The idea behind implanting technology inside the human body has been around since the 1950s. The patent for the first cardiac pacemaker was submitted in 1952 and was the size of a table radio. This was not a fully implantable solution and required leads to be connected to an external power source. With the advent of the transistor in the mid-1950s, the ability to construct a fully implantable device was achieved in May of 1958. The first implantable technology was actually placed inside of a test animal. The first human to receive an electrical device implanted in the body was in Buffalo, New York in 1960. The tech up to this point was very static and didn't allow for much in the way of conditional executions or modifications from the original programming. 1964 gave host to the first implantable technology that can take data from the body itself. Throughout the 70s and 80s, there were advancements, but nothing that was really going to set, the implant community on its ear. 1990 is when things really started to pick up for the implant community. From the creation of smart devices all the way through to today, where discussions of artificial intelligence are commonplace. For biohackers, our history was forged by the medical profession to address deficiencies of the human body from a reactive perspective. By that, I mean that the issues were already there. Additionally, there were no options for an individual to enhance themselves through any type of technological way. So who are we today? People like myself are referred to by many names: biohacker, grinder, transhuman. Regardless of what name you want to put on us, we all share the concept of moving beyond the human form we were born into. The term transhuman was actually first coined by Julian Huxley in 1957. The movement he created was fueled by multiple people looking to extend the capabilities of the human being itself. So let's take a minute to talk about some of these implants and what their actual intended purposes are. These devices were designed to make people's lives easier. We have the ability to start our vehicles with implants. Imagine never losing your keys again. Or how many people have fobs to access a gym or a shared garage or a storage unit? All of these could be stored on an implant. What about being able to pay for goods and services with the same methods as Apple Pay or Android Wallet, but you never have to worry about forgetting your phone? Every one of these activities constitute a legitimate use case for a microchip implant. Unfortunately, not all of us are friendly. As security professionals, we need to start looking beyond what we're comfortable with, beyond the normal attacks that we've heard of and dealt with for years. The attacks and the end game may not have changed, but the delivery method has come right off the movie screen and into our companies, infrastructures, and data centers. Security admins know the normal attack vectors: USB drives, phishing, CVEs, the list goes on and on. But how do you address the fact that any one of your employees could potentially have a full Linux system to RFID or NFC chips beneath their skin? What if someone implanted an HID or a proximity access chip? There would be no evidence of any type of compromise to the naked eye if someone was to be in a restricted physical location. Chip implants utilize the same technologies that enterprises are using: RFID door badges, NFC for IoT, MyFair/HID proximity cards, and that's just a few of them that I'm calling out right off the top of my head. So with the number of regulations and audits that companies are required to do for compliance, how would you know if someone has bypassed your security policy and brought a rogue asset into your environments? The simple answer is you wouldn't. I want to talk about a project called the Peg Leg. The Peg Leg is a single board computer that has been modified to a minimalistic form factor with a wireless charging receiver and then encased in biopolymer and actually implanted within the body. This is on the outer edge of extreme, even for most biohackers. This is not a simple process, and making sure that the single board computer is completely sealed has caused a number of individuals that have attempted this implant to require emergency removal surgery. This still does not stop many more, including myself, from trying to get one of these things implanted. The possibilities for a concealed Linux system are only limited by one's imagination. Originally intended to act as a logless file transfer drop, the Peg Leg was originally designed to leverage the Pirate Box software. However, as with anything in the technology space, people took that simple idea and have branched out to more creative or devious areas based on your perspective. Full Linux distributions have been implanted. These devices are headless, but have a Wi-Fi access point configured to allow access to the implanted device. Once connected, the attacker has access to a terminal for interactive processes, or could set to perform non-interactive scans and sweeps for low-energy Bluetooth that could be utilized for an attack like Blueborn, or work in conjunction with a USB share application such as Virtual Here. An attacker could execute mouse jacking attacks and inject automated payloads with tools like Jacket, all while standing and having a conversation with you or sitting next to you at your desk. These devices have Wi-Fi as well as Bluetooth capabilities and can be accessed over SSH from a mobile device. This would allow a bad actor to have access to binaries or even something as widely known as responder. They can be made into rogue access points as well as command and control servers. The total number of Peg Leg implants is really not widely known, as this was a community-based project. However, the fact that there is at least one individual that has this ability should be more than enough to cause security admins to stop and take notice. Let's take a moment to think about this. How, as security professionals, can we regulate secure locations if people have the ability to conceal full computers within their body? This becomes an even greater challenge for companies and governmental agencies who may require elevated clearance to access files or physical locations. This essentially removes the power and the control from the security authority by obfuscating systems that can be leveraged for nefarious purposes. Let's continue with our next attack vector. This one is around the issue of physical access. Any company will have restricted locations on-prem, whether that be executive offices to supply rooms to server rooms. The need to keep access restricted in some locations is just part of doing business. There are additionally, I would bet, a large number of people in this room that have some type of work ID badge on a lanyard or possibly on a keychain. And I would additionally bet there's a large number of people that feel that this type of badge and reader system is an acceptable risk from an audit perspective, and as such, should appease the C-level execs to the fact that our locations are secure. This is 2021. I really hope nobody here believes that. How many people have an access badge on like I said, on a lanyard or a retractable belt clip most of the time? How many of us are spatially aware to the point where if we were talking to someone, say, like me, would you notice if I palmed the tool like a Proxmark Chameleon Mini and was able to read your access badge while we were talking? I know. There's no way that someone would be able to do that to me. Well, I hope you're right. I have countless case studies that involve cloned access badges that I can use as proof that this is a viable attack vector. The act of cloning an access badge isn't even new. The technology has literally been commercially available for almost a decade. What makes this attack vector different is there's no evidence of the breach. Unlike the old days where an attacker would need to have a copy of the clone key or battery pack for the Proxmark in order to replay that scraped data, now attackers can write this information to a sub-dermal implant and proceed with no way for security professionals to know how their systems have been compromised. So let's talk about the first attack demonstration. This one's called Handshake. Handshake is a clone or replay attack that utilizes the tool, like I stated, Proxmark, any other card reader, to read the data contained on cards or access fobs and then store or rewrite that tag or information to another tag. In this case, the other tag's just going to be the implant in my left hand. So let's go ahead and I'll walk you through this attack. NFC, or near field communication, is an amazing technology that many of us have in our pockets right now. Every Android device has full access to transmit or receive NFC data. Apple is a bit more complicated to explain functionality. With iOS 11, iPhones 7 and 8, and X can be used to read NFC tags. iPhone 6 and 6S can be used to make NFC payments with Apple Pay, but has no ability to read standalone NFC tags. Apple at this time only allows NFC tags to be read via apps. There is no native support for native reads. I can almost hear all of the iPhone people out there cheering. You get a pass on this one for now. I have not heard of any roadmap for iPhones, but as the functionality continues to be adopted for industries involving IoT, I have to believe that Apple is weighing the security concerns very carefully. So, like I just stated, standard NFC utilization can be almost anything from beaming a file to a coworker or a friend, or using a key fob or app to transmit a signal to a receiver to allow some action to take place. Here's where it gets interesting. NFC gets its power from the receiver. There's no internal power required to be able to keep a loaded tag in a waiting state. The implant that I will be using for this next attack will be the FlexNext, and we're going to talk about leprosy. So the first attack, as I said, is leprosy. This attack may not always work, as there are a few conditions that need to be met in order to execute properly. Those conditions being NFC must be enabled and allow apps from unknown source must be enabled under the developer's tools on the Android device that I'm attacking. At this point, it's a matter of social engineering a situation where I can get my hands physically on your device. Again, I hear it all the time. I never let my phone out of my sight. Well, that's fine. I don't need it out of your sight. This attack, as well as Fleshhook, are designed to be performed and executed in plain sight, and actually standing either right next to you or sitting right next to you, but in close proximity. I don't think it would be a large stretch of the imagination to assume that if we worked together and we maybe even if we didn't, if I was to make some scene about an issue with my wife or maybe my daughter or my granddaughter, and I was pleading for someone to help me make a call, I know the good Samaritan out there and someone would be there to be my victim. We all have a built-in control to try and avoid conflict, as well as not wanting to be viewed by our peers as uncaring. As an attacker, I know this, and I will do everything in my power to take advantage of it. Once the phone or tablet is in my hands, the receiver in the device will pick up the tag I have programmed in my hand that is pointing to a web location containing an infected APK that I've actually created through the use of the MSF Venom tool for Metasploit. So anyone not familiar with MSF Venom, it's part of the Metasploit framework and is used to create connections back to the command and control server. So I've gotten the device in my hands. The chip is prompted to either install or save the file. I go through the motions of what appears to be making a phone call. What I'm actually doing is loading the APK and then quickly returning the device back to you, the owner. This attack will provide persistence as well as a hidden icon so that the owner would not be able to see anything out of the ordinary, as well as not finding anything in the applications list to show that I had done anything wrong. What if that was a work phone? What if that was the device you do your banking with? In this scenario, I'm already in your phone before I even leave the room. From the Metasploit server, I can gain access to contacts, emails, photos, downloads, essentially anything that is on the device. All right, so in this next use case, I've programmed the chip in my hand to point to a very specific website that's been compromised with the Beef suite. Beef is the browser exploit extension framework. This infects or hooks the browsers of any device that connects to it and allows remote code execution as well as potential persistence. Through the Beef suite, the attacker can enumerate the local LAN the device is connected to, as well as execute advanced phishing attacks executed on the device itself. Again, this requires a bit of social engineering, but as we just talked about, that's really not a problem. What makes this attack even more dangerous than leprosy is that there's no need to install anything. Along with the fact that most mobile devices have some type of web browser pre-installed, NFC and a browser are the only requirements for this attack. Let's see how this attack looks in real life. So this brings us to the future. Who will we become as technology continues to evolve? We talk about the future of implants. It's as if we're trying to write a new science fiction movie. Companies like Tesla are working on technology like the Neuralink, a brain implant that will allow interfacing between the brain directly to a computer system. This sounds like a man in the middle scenario just waiting to happen to me. Products like the Willet, a Bluetooth receiver that requires no batteries and gets its power from the air. And we all know that Bluetooth is not vulnerable, right? Ever heard of Blueborn? Imagine if that attack could jump from person to person. Or what about implantable Wi-Fi transmitters and receivers? There's a product in development right now called a neurobrain. This is essentially turning the human being into a Wi-Fi access point. Nobody's ever been able to compromise Wi-Fi before, right? And these are just a few that we know about. Currently, the biggest restriction to advanced technology implants is still the power source. There's not currently an effective way to provide clean power to any devices on a commercial implant. This is the same issue with the peg leg and the need for the indirect fast charging. It's not always the computer technology that needs to catch up. In this case, the only thing holding back progress is power. Once that's been addressed, the possibility of 24/7 access to an embedded system in the body is not that far out of reality. I want to take a moment to talk about the legality, morality, and ethical issues around implanted technologies. From a legal perspective, there is no federal laws regulating microchip implants. At the state level, as you can see from the graphic on your screen, there are multiple states that have adopted different types of legislation. There are essentially two real types of laws that have been passed around microchip implants within the United States. One mainly focuses around employers and one that is pretty much just general. First one is banning employers mandating employees microchip themselves with implants. And number two is just a straight out general ban on all microchip implants. So let's talk about liability from an employer's perspective. If an employee gets chipped, does that in and of itself make that employee a security risk? What if they're just using the chip to access a gym or a garage that has nothing to do with the company, but the chip could be used in an offensive manner? Would that be something that a CISO would want to know? We allow employees to bring personal phones to work, excluding restricted areas, but detection is a hell of a lot more obvious. Much of the current legislation stems from a push to replace access badges with implants for physical security. But as this may help from the I lost my badge perspective, it doesn't enhance the security posture for a company. Remember, implant chips at this point are static. They require a reader or power source to be able to function. Now, just like with the Handshake attack, bad actors could use the same tools and scrape the target's implant information the same as if it was on a physical key card. The main difference being that you can take your key card and lock it at home when you go out. Implants are on all the time. If there's a receiver within range, they will read the chip. There is currently no off switch, and as such, attackers now have 24/7 access to physical access data. When we talk about the concepts of morality and ethics, unfortunately, the topic of faith typically comes into play in these discussions. I want to take a moment and say that I am in no way trying to be disrespectful to any religion, faith. I'm speaking just to the questions that I have personally heard. As an international speaker, I've had discussions with people all over the world about my implants. Discussions typically go in basically one of two different directions. Mostly it starts with fear from whoever I'm talking to me. I've been told that I have the mark of the beast. I've been told that I am being tracked by the man. I've been asked if it's the same chip that people have in their dogs or cats. All of these conversations are driven by the fear of the unknown or the different. I've had acquaintances tell me that they're physically afraid of me due to my implants. I don't really understand what they're afraid of. It's almost as though they think I'm going to turn into a Terminator and go on a rampage. The truth is that there are more people like me out there than you probably can imagine. The difference is that I don't have a problem with people knowing who and what I am. Many others like me keep their implants secret over the concern of the social stigma associated with microchipping. The decision to augment ourselves should hold no weight in regards to the issues of faith or morality, provided that that decision is still left with the individual and not a mandate from any type of authority. Like I said earlier, not all of us are friendly, but most of us are. So how far is too far? We briefly touched on the Tesla Neuralink and the peg leg, two very different products with broad sweeping ramifications to the individual, as well as employers and law enforcement. I remember a movie from 1995 called Johnny Mnemonic, where the lead actor has a hard drive in his brain and is using it as a storage device and is a courier for stolen data. Or The Matrix, where to learn a new skill, we just load the instruction set and we have that knowledge within our minds. The genie is out of the bottle at this point, and there is no way it's going back in. As technology continues to advance and improve the quality of life, we need to remember that any tool, regardless of what its original intent was, can be misused. As security professionals, we need to be aware of this and adapt our countermeasures to include this new attack vector. The fact that there is nothing unilateral across the board, it will in most locations become a corporate decision on how to address chipped employees. Without a better understanding of the technologies being discussed, these choices may be made for the wrong reasons. To say anyone with an implanted technology is an automatic threat would be that saying any car owner could be a vehicular homicide suspect. So, takeaways. In the next couple of weeks, what should you do? If you are dealing with contactless technology, audit those contactless protocols for vulnerable technologies. Within the next 3 months following this presentation, understand the scope of your contactless systems, as well as defining appropriate controls. Within 6 months, implement technologies which allow for an additional security for contactless technologies, like the addition of switches, lock passwords, BAC, or mutual authentication. Thank you very much for your attendance. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions.